So this is Getting It, all about consent. So what is consent? The whole point of this class is we're going to get into what consent means, how do you get it, when do you need it, how do you take it away, how do you talk about it, all of those things, because consent is the most important thing in the lifestyle. Without it, you have a bunch of really bad situations going on if you're not getting consent whenever you're doing the things that we do. If you want to ensure that you're having a good, safe time, this is the most important thing. And that's why we wanted to do this class, is because while the lifestyle is about having fun and it's about getting sexy and it's about experiencing new things, all of that can get really messy, really painful, really harmful if you're not having consent throughout that entire situation. So some fast facts about consent that we're going to kind of cover in more detail as we go through this is that consent is the foundation of everything we do in the lifestyle. Again, without it, you have cheating, you have abuse, you have a bunch of trauma just waiting to happen. So that's why we want to cover it, because without it, everything else we do doesn't mean anything. Consent is always reversible. We're going to get into this. Just because you got consent once from somebody does not mean that you're going to have it every single time. People can change their minds in the middle of play. They can change it before play, and they can take it away after, saying, hey, that was cool, but I don't want to do that anymore. So we're going to cover that in detail. Consent conversations are for all people. We kind of really focus on making sure that the men in the lifestyle are really aware of consent, and there's a good reason for that. But consent conversations need to be happening with everybody. I've actually seen a lot of consent violations perpetrated by women who assume that because they're women, they don't have to ask permission. So that's something that we're going to cover in detail. If you think consent conversations are boring, I have news for you. You're boring. Consent conversations are necessary, and they can be really, really fun. If you think that asking for consent is going to ruin the mood, or it makes things awkward, or it takes the fun out of it, then you're not really someone that I want to have fun with. So consent makes everything better. When you are not worried about if everyone's cool with everything, if you're not having that anxiety about if what you're doing is okay, if everyone's going to feel okay afterwards, you can actually enjoy what you're doing and have a good time. And then something else we're going to cover is regret does not equal a consent violation. There's a lot of times where we will do things and afterwards we feel about it, but that does not mean that your consent was violated. That just means you probably won't do that again and you regret it. So we'll get into all that in detail. And then the last slide I'm going to cover before I start switching off with Jen is this. So what is consent? We're going to be going over the Fry's model, which if you've been in the lifestyle for any length of time, you've probably heard this. It was coined by Planned Parenthood to kind of describe what consent is and how to talk about it, with one little change that I have made. This is something that I learned in another consent class that I took in the community. So we're going to be talking about how consent needs to be freely given. It is reversible. It needs to be informed. And then the change that is made is it needs to be engaged. What you'll normally see here is enthusiastic, but there's a reason why I choose engaged versus enthusiastic, and we'll get into that. And then it also needs to be specific. So now we're going to kind of break these down and talk about what these mean in detail. So Jen, if you want to jump in.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, London. I am a huge fan of the Fry's model. I, for one, have been a victim of consent violations, and London's right. If you don't want to talk about it, you're boring. Because it is why we get to have the fun that we do. And a lot of people question, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have consent that's freely given? Well, it means that that person gave that permission to you without being afraid, without you making them feel like they needed to in order to continue maybe being your friend or being a part of that circle. Most importantly, it needs to be given with sober intent. A lot of times we find ourselves at parties and we're all drinking and having a great time. And it's really important that we make sure our partners, our playmates, are being given the opportunity to say yes when they're aware of their surroundings and their intentions. And that's because you are the person that should be making this decision, not someone else, not drunk Jen, not high Jen, but Jen, and not my partner. And you don't give consent out of the desire to not disappoint or ruin the vibe. When you do that, a lot of times is where you run into the places where you feel violated and it's really regret. It's really important to feel comfortable and involved in your surroundings by being able to voice your opinion and feel free to do so. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. Yeah, I just second everything that Jen said. Again, if you were giving your consent out of any sort of duress, it was not freely given, and therefore it is not consent. So just remember that. The next thing is, this is such a huge one, and something that I think can get overlooked, especially in the lifestyle, is what makes consent reversible. Why is it reversible? What does that mean? So consent can and will evolve or change depending on the situations or the people, or even just what type of mood you're in. A person may be okay with something in one situation or with one person or on one day, and then they're not okay with it in another. So if you're used to going up to people and you're used to maybe kissing a certain person when you see them, it never hurts to check, hey, are you still okay with me doing this? Just because I did it that one time doesn't mean it's still okay. Or just because they do it with certain people doesn't mean it's okay with other people. You never want to assume consent without that proper discussion. You never want to assume that, we talked about how we were going to hook up at this party, so if I go up to them and I just start grabbing them, that's totally okay. Double check. Never assume anything. Like, make sure, hey, the vibe's still good. You still good with me doing this? And then you can go at it and have a good time. But it never hurts to take that quick second to check, because someone can always change their mind. And it's okay to be disappointed if there's a change in consent. If someone is getting into something with you, they're playing with you at a party, maybe it's getting really hot and heavy, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what, actually, I don't think I can do this, or I'm not comfortable with this, or this isn't really working for me. It's okay to be disappointed by that, but you should never shame or guilt anyone for changing their mind, because that's how you get into things like coercion or manipulation and people saying yes to things just because they're afraid they've upset you. So you want to make sure that, if someone changes their mind, it's okay to be like, damn, that sucks, but don't put that on them. People are allowed to change their minds.
Yeah, it's not okay to say, oh man, but we did it last time, we should be able to do it this time.
Yes, 1000%. And this is also important for the people giving the consent. It is okay to change your mind. You do not have to stick with something just because you said you were going to do it. We get kind of stuck in our head sometimes about like making sure you're keeping your word and things like that. This is not the same thing. If you change your mind, if you're not feeling it, if you don't feel safe, comfortable, just you're not feeling that vibe anymore, it's okay to say, hey, I changed my mind. This isn't working. Do not feel bad for doing that. You should stick up for yourself. It's way better than gritting your teeth, maybe going through a situation that you are going to regret or may cause trauma later, especially because that other person may feel shitty if they realize that, oh, you actually weren't into that. Damn, if I had known, I wouldn't have gone further. So just remember that you can always take it away. And also remember, when people do take it away, it needs to be respected, no matter what type of conversation was had beforehand.
What makes consent informed? Every person's profile is going to be different here. And so knowing and getting a conversation going about why you may want this or why you may not be okay with something else is so important. I like to think about negotiations in BDSM as just as important in my every other type of play situation. If I'm aware of what is going to make this experience good for you, then I'm able to give you a good experience. But if I'm not aware of what's going to make this a poor experience for you, then I'm not going to be able to give you a good experience. And that may, like London mentioned, may make me feel bad later, because we are all here to have fun and bring joy and pleasure to our partners, to our playmates. But it's not at the risk of putting yourself or someone else in a situation where you were made to feel poorly. And while you can't always know what's going to happen, making sure that those lines of communication were made open during those negotiation phases will create an atmosphere that during play, I am much more likely to stop and say in the middle, you know, actually, right now I'm not feeling this. I don't feel comfortable. Let's change scene. Let's change the plan, or let's take a break. But that all starts with having those conversations ahead of time and being informed prior to going to the bedroom. London?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with, again, that informed part. Sometimes people don't know what to ask. So if, say something about your health or a partner's rules or boundaries, and the other person didn't know or think to ask, if you know that it's going to affect the time you have together and you just decide not to mention it because no one asked about it, that was wrong. You deceived whoever you were playing with. That is not informed consent, because there was information there that was needed by all parties and was not shared. So make sure that just because something wasn't covered by the other person, if you know it's helpful and it's going to make the experience better, you share it. And again, you're not going to be able to anticipate every single thing that could go wrong, or maybe every single thing that could affect something. But again, like Jen said, if you have those open communications, especially ahead of time, you're going to feel much more comfortable talking about them afterwards and kind of doing that debrief. It's going to make everyone's experience way better. So what makes consent engaged? So this is where there's a slight alteration from the normal Fry's model, which includes enthusiastic. So why have I altered it? Like I said, I got this from another consent class that I got to, and I really, really liked this change. It's because sometimes we want to do things, but we're not necessarily enthusiastic. Maybe we're nervous. Maybe we're unsure. Maybe it's a mixture of things. But that doesn't mean we don't want to do the thing. It just means that there may be other emotions there. And enthusiastic can sometimes not be achievable before you do the thing because you're not sure how you're going to feel. There's also times where enthusiasm does not mean someone is engaged. If you are into kink play, for instance, this is a good example, and you're having a scene with a sub or a bottom, and you ask them in the middle of the scene, hey, do you want to have sex? They may scream from the rafters, absolutely, yes, fuck me right now. And then later they're like, oh my God, so I was not in the right headspace, even though I seemed really into that. I was not actually engaged because I was somewhere else. So enthusiasm does not mean engagement. So what does engagement mean? It means that you are aware, you're present, and you want to be a part of the experience. It's not necessarily about what you're feeling about it. It is about the decisions and the choices you're making. Even if you're unsure about how it's going to affect you or how you may enjoy the time, especially if you're trying something new, you still know what you want, you are present in the situation, and you want to do it. So engaged can look enthusiastic, absolutely. You can definitely be like, I definitely want to do this. Please, like, take me into that other room and do all these things to me right now. And people are hopping to that bedroom. But it can look like a myriad of other things. And that's why I think using the word engaged as opposed to enthusiastic can cover more situations and can kind of also keep in mind that enthusiasm doesn't mean engagement, because this also covers like when people are intoxicated or are high. They may be very enthusiastic to do things that they are not actually engaged in doing. So.
I love that change, London, and it's really important to
Yes.
to know the difference between enthusiastic and engaged. And I think along the way, we've really kind of segued into, well, what about that S? Why does it have to be specific? And that comes down to, again, not wanting to cause harm or trauma to our partners. It allows us to be clear and as specific as possible about what you are allowing out of that person. And this may be someone you are with on a regular basis, or it may be someone that you're really new to playing with. Either way, being specific allows both of you to be in a place where you can feel confident moving into that play period. So even if you're unsure of what you wanted to do, you can still be clear of what not to do. I, again, bring this back to my experience in kink. And I think that's where I've learned the most about consent and why it becomes a good place for me to lean on for experiences. But I, may be using the same type of furniture that we're used to and the same type of tools. And I may not want the same experience I had the last time. I may want heavier flogging because I am looking for a different outcome. Or I may want more sensory from a lighter flogging because tonight I'm looking to do this in a more relaxing way. But if all I say to my partner is, yeah, I want to go spend time on the cross, well, then I'm not really going to give him the opportunity to give me what I'm looking for. But that doesn't give him the ability to just say, okay, well, I'm going to use this random tool on you I've never used before. And so it allows us to, one, be in control of the situation from beginning to end, but it also, two, allows us to grow together and make sure that that experience is the best it could have been.
And something else I wanted to add to that, and I'm actually going to use an example for our upcoming party for the masquerade. We're going to be having a glory hole experience where ladies are going to be able to pass out wristbands, to people that they're giving consent to do things to them. Each of those people are still going to have a list of things that they're okay with and that they're not okay with. So just because they're saying, hey, you can come use me in this glory hole, it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want to this person in that situation. And that kind of goes into that specific thing. Like, yes, I'm saying yes to being in this glory hole, and you can, you can fuck me in my vagina, you can use a condom, you can use your hands, your mouth, whatever, but you can't do anal to me, or you have to wear a condom. You can't go bareback on me. Or maybe I don't want you to use your hands on me. Maybe I just want your dick, or whatever it is. Like, you can be very specific. Saying yes to certain things does not mean yes to all things. So yeah, I just wanted to use like a very recent upcoming example for that, one yes does not mean all yeses. So now we're going to move into a little bit more detail. So what now? Like, now that you know what consent is, you know what all the basic tenets are. So who is this for? How do you get consent, and how do you give or decline consent? Because it goes both ways. It's not just about the people trying to get it. It's also about the people who are giving it and what they're supposed to do. So the big thing here is, who is this for? Everybody. And this is something that I really, really wanted to stress. Because this is something that I have seen specifically in the community, but really in any situation. We all know that everyone needs to follow consent, but I have some specific people I want to talk to. Ladies, you have to get consent too. You are not exempt from those consent conversations. Just because you are a woman does not mean that you can go up to other women or to men, do whatever you want, and people are just going to be grateful because they're getting attention from you. I'm going to use the example of my husband, because this is something that we have dealt with often. If anyone knows my husband, Russell, he wears kilts everywhere. And he's pretty known for that. I cannot tell you how many times we've been to events and women have gone up and just went and lifted up his kilt to see if he was, wearing it appropriately or whatever. And it'll be people that he doesn't know. It'll be at events that are not even for that. He's had that happen at like bars, just out and about in vanilla situations, and people just don't ask, or they will ask very inappropriate questions. Like I said, we've been in like just bars or restaurants, and women will ask questions about what he's wearing underneath his kilt. That's so inappropriate. And because they're women, they think it's just cute and funny. So that's something that we really need to think about, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I can just go up and start making out with everyone. Like, yes, there are some people that I know I can do that, but I checked to make sure that I can do that with them. And then on the flip side of that, fellas, you are allowed to say no. Just because someone is giving you attention, especially a woman, does not mean that you have to just like, oh my gosh, just laugh it off and be really uncomfortable. I know that my husband, in those examples I was giving, felt very uncomfortable at times, but didn't feel like he could say no. He felt for some reason like it would make him less of a man. He'd be thought of as weird because he was, not enjoying the attention, whatever it was. So just remember that you're allowed to say no as well. You are allowed to speak up and say, hey, please don't touch me like that, or please don't say that to me. That's really uncomfortable. And then for everyone, no one owes you consent. You are not owed anything from anyone in terms of their consent. If you go up to give a hug to someone and they say, hey, I'm not really a hugger, I wouldn't like to hug. You don't get to say, well, I hug everyone. Everyone should hug me. Or you hugged that other person. Okay, so that doesn't mean anything. So just remember that no one owes you that. You still need to ask. You need to respect their boundaries. And for, if you need anything, in terms of if you've experienced abuse or sexual assault, whether you're a man, a woman, non-binary, anything like that, please reach out. Support's available. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, the number is on the screen. And if you also just experience anything within the group, please feel free to reach out to our staff. We're all very passionate about consent, and we want to make you feel safe and supported in this group. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any issues like that.
How do you get consent? So I'm sure, like many of you, you have gone, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to start this. I really want to play with them, but I don't know. Honestly, it can be that nerve-wracking and awkward at times. Or if you're me, every time. But what's even more awkward than that is in the middle of an opportunity you have to play with that person, they go, hey, I'm not okay with that. Stop. To me, I'm probably going to be more traumatized by the stop in the middle than I am the no at the beginning. So what does that look like? How can you do it? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a contract and binding or formal and businesslike, but it should be an engaging conversation between you and your partner about what it is you're asking for and what you're expecting out of it. And there are a lot of fun yet clear ways to communicate that whenever you guys are ready to have those conversations. And you can do that with, again, going back to that fries model. But most importantly, it's about having that open line of communication and making sure that you're comfortable, just explaining what you want. And sometimes just knowing what you want is all of the power you need to get the courage to go ask for it. Most people are going to be more appreciative that you've asked than they're going to be insulted that you just sat across the room and glanced and then touched as you walked by. So just because you watch someone else get a hug doesn't mean you automatically get to do so, but you may walk up to them with a gesture with your arms out and sit and go, hey, can I have one too? Or I'd love to give you a hug too. Are you a hugger? It doesn't have to be, hello, my name is Jennifer. I love giving hugs and I would like to give you one. Is that permissible? It's all about just making the most of a situation and being sure that you've asked before you've touched.
Yeah, something I wanted to add to this on the, fun but clear ways to communicate. Something that I've talked about in negotiations classes that I've had is that whenever you are asking for consent or asking for permission, it can be really fun and really sexy. It doesn't have to be, like she said, it doesn't have to be very businesslike. You can say, I'd really like to kiss you. You can lean in and be really sexy with it. You can be really seductive. You can be really silly with it if you want to do that. There's a lot of ways to ask for consent that are not awkward, like she said, where you just go up, you introduce yourself, you're really firm, you're really, awkward and everything like that. You can make it as fun, as silly, as sexy, as seductive as you want, as long as you are being clear and as long as you are not taking it past what you've asked for. So just remember that. So, how do I give or decline consent? This is something that I actually feel is one of the hardest parts sometimes. Between, wanting to feel safe. A lot of us have people pleasing tendencies. We don't want to be a downer or ruin the vibe. Not to mention, sometimes we just lack the communication skills. Telling people what we do or don't want to do can be absolutely terrifying. It can also be super awkward. So I think that this is something that a lot of people struggle with, and a lot of people will grit their teeth through interactions just because they don't know how to say no. So the first thing that is sometimes easier said than done, but is very important to remember, is that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to say anything else than that. If someone comes up and they start to do something to you, you can say no. And that's all you have to say. If they don't respect that, they are 1000% the problem. You should contact someone, especially if you're at an event, contact staff member or security, because that is the complete sentence. But be very clear. When you are talking to people, most people are going to take a, hey, I'm not okay with this. And they're going to take it in stride. Yeah, sure, they may be a little embarrassed, or they may be a little disappointed, but they're not going to freak out. But people can't respect boundaries that they don't know exist. So if you're not saying anything, if you're not telling people, hey, I'm not okay with that, or if I preferred you did it this way, or I'm okay with this but not this, you can't really expect them to respect that boundary because they didn't know about it. And then this goes for yes and for no. If you say yes to something but you're not clear on what you're saying yes to, it's like, hey, I'm good with sex. Okay, what does that mean? Because sex can be oral sex, it can be PIV sex, it can be anal sex, it can be all sorts of things. So are you okay with all of those? Are you okay with, all sorts of things going in all of your orifices? You've got to be pretty clear and specific. And then if you're saying no to things, you can say, hey, so I'm not cool if you kiss me, but I'm okay giving a hug, or maybe we can kiss next time we hang out, or I just don't do that right now. So just be clear. If you do feel unsafe in any way, make sure that you have someone around. If you're in a public place, if you're at an event especially, make sure you find a friend, find a dungeon monitor if you're in a kink setting, find security or a staff member, especially at an OTB event. We always have staff and security around. If someone is making you feel uncomfortable, or if you need to tell someone, hey, I don't consent to something, and you don't want to do it by yourself, grab a friend. There's nothing wrong with that at all, especially when we talk about like negotiations and kink. I highly recommend people who are new to it have other people with them whenever they're doing that sort of thing. Practice. I cannot stress enough how important this is, even though it can sound a little weird. And so what do I mean by practice? One, practice saying no in situations that don't feel so high stakes and don't feel so, in your face, in the moment, lots of pressure. Say no to things in just your everyday life that you want to say no to. Oh, would you like this on your salad? No, thank you. It sounds silly, but when you get used to saying no in like non-stressful situations, it's easier to say no in those stressful situations. Practice with friends. Say, hey guys, I'm going to try and practice saying no, or try and practice communicating at least what I'm okay with in certain situations. Can you just help me out with that in cases? I have friends who have done that with me throughout my lifestyle journey, and it's definitely helped me get more confident whenever I say no. Practice saying no in the mirror even. Sometimes we can just feel silly. We don't feel confident. We don't feel strong enough to say no sometimes. So practice saying that. And then the same thing with saying yes. Sometimes you may be shy or you're nervous. So practice saying yes to things, say yes to stuff that maybe you're not even sure of. It's like, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to try it. Practice does make perfect, even in this situation. So now we're going to go through, and I figure, Jen, we can just kind of switch off on all these bullet points.
Yeah.
I'll start with the first one. So these are some lifestyle specific consent considerations. Even though these are applicable everywhere, all of this stuff is applicable in everyday life. But these are very specific things that I kind of want to go over that I think affect us more as lifestylers. The first one, this is a huge one that I can definitely see as a recurring issue at lifestyle events, particularly clothing or lack thereof, or any sort of costuming is not an invitation. Someone can be walking around butt naked. That does not mean that you get to touch them. That is not saying, hey, I want you to appreciate my naked body with your hands. So make sure that you are not assuming anything. Even when people are, going to events, and there's implied consent areas, people are walking into places, like there's still consent there. It's saying, hey, if you walk in here, you're giving consent to have this happen. That all makes sense. But that does not mean outside of that space that continues on. So make sure that you're just respecting people. People are allowed to wear whatever they want or not wear whatever they want. And that does not mean that you get to, enjoy yourself by appreciating, like I said, their bodies with your hands.
I have got to say, London, that is probably something that I have learned to be more comfortable doing the more OTB events I attend. Is I have yet to just be touched because I was naked. And I can't say that about other events I've been to. And I think that goes a lot because we do care so much and put on classes like this.
Absolutely.
And recently I've had the opportunity to experience that there are still people who believe that group settings like orgies or gangbangs do not relieve your need to ask for consent. I was at an event where a gentleman, had struck up conversation with me, and we were very close to an orgy going on, and he went to go touch. And I was like, well, have you asked first? And he's like, well, this is an orgy. Obviously, they've given consent to be played with. And I said, well, they've given consent to those partners in there, but if you'd like to join, it's really important you speak to them before just touching or joining in. And this person was really surprised to hear me say that I, as a person at an orgy, still had the ability to say no to another person at the same orgy. And if you take anything away from this class, it's that, yes, even at an event, fully nude, giving a blowjob to one person while taking it in the back from another, you still have the power to say no.
Damn straight.
It's so, so important that we not only be powerful enough to say no, but be confident enough to accept no. And the more of us that do so, the more power we'll give to those who aren't as confident to say no.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to put this on here, that caught up in the moment thing. I hear that and see that a lot. You want to make sure that, caught up in the moment is not an excuse for anything. You still need to respect the boundaries, respect the rules that were laid down, respect the people involved. Even if you are invited into a group setting or an orgy or anything, if there were rules or limits discussed or that or aware, you still have to respect those. Just getting caught up in all of the energy is not an excuse to not. So assuming consent in lifestyle spaces is a surefire way to get banned. We've kind of already talked about this, but assuming that, when you go into certain spaces and you're allowed to touch how you want, you're allowed to do the same things that everybody else is doing to certain people, you can insert yourself into situations, just assuming that because people are present at lifestyle events, you are allowed to act however you want with whoever you want. That is definitely how you get banned, especially in OTB. We take that shit very seriously. Consent should never be assumed. Even when people are walking into, like I said, implied consent type of spaces or rooms, like when you walk into, say, if you go into this room, you're consenting to, participate in a gangbang. you still have to ask consent for certain things, and people going in there still have to give their consent for certain things. So just make sure that you're not assuming anything, and you're going to have a fine time here.
And I just ditto that of being a victim. But previously, I think it is so important that there is at least a community that is willing to say, no, I'm sorry, you have broken consent too many times to be included in our events any longer. And we don't take light in doing that, which is why we bring that to you here in a class first before doing it. Respect barrier requirements. I don't know how many of you know, but it is actually assault if you refuse or remove a condom or barrier during sex. This rule is so important for so many reasons. Your obvious pregnancy and STD transmissions, but also because some couples, like, this rule is really important to them, and this is make or break. And it is really traumatic for that couple to experience that, and they may not be able to come back from it. And just because you see someone playing with someone else without a condom, that doesn't mean that they don't have a condom rule. That might be a play partner that they have trust and relationships with from long before, and they have made an agreement together as a play partners. Every opportunity that you get to play with someone is an opportunity to ask whether or not they would like a barrier during play. I can personally say it feels terrible to feel like you violated that. And it is so much easier to just ask first and get that giggly part out of the way than to have to feel bad or hurt another person's boundaries because you didn't want to. And just, if you don't want to, that just means they're not the play partner for you.
Absolutely. Speak up if you're uncomfortable. Again, we talked about how it can be really hard to say no. It can be really hard to advocate for yourself. And so I put this forth as a way for people who do struggle with it because they don't want to, rock the boat too much, or maybe they struggle with people pleasing. You're doing it for your sake as well as for others. If people are not told, hey, what you're doing is wrong, that made me uncomfortable, you didn't ask, that violated a boundary, if you're not speaking up about those things, you are also putting others at risk because those people are going to repeat those mistakes with other people. So yes, you need to be doing it for you. You need to be advocating for yourself. You need to be protecting you. But also remember, every time you speak up and you are stopping someone from violating consent or from making harmless mistakes but doing them over and over, you're helping others as well and making sure that their experiences are good, especially because the people who may be violating your consent, maybe they're not doing it on purpose. Unintentional consent violations happen all the time. And if they knew about it, they would fix the behavior, they would apologize, and they can grow and be better. But if they just maybe get a secret reputation for violating consent, they don't even know what's going on, that can harm their time, that can harm other people. So just make sure that, when you remember that, oh, it's really hard to speak up and it can be really awkward, that it's not just for you, it's for everyone who is going to come in contact with that person as well as that person themselves.
If you regret or didn't like something later, that does not mean your consent was violated. Unfortunately, these kind of things happen. You're really not able to experience all the new things if you're not comfortable with knowing that there's going to be times that you didn't really like it. Oftentimes in the lifestyle, we've seen that be spoken about as a consent violation, and it's really important to know the difference. That was a learning opportunity. That is now one of the bullet points that you're going to include in a future negotiation that you may otherwise not have known about. But violation of consent is serious. And to place that upon someone just because you didn't like it later is not fair and can be really damning in this community.
Definitely. another thing we talked about is asking about partners, but also respecting partners. Sometimes a lot of the responsibility is placed on the people who are asking for the consent, who are wanting to do the thing, to ask all of the questions. And that is important. You should kind of, just get into the habit of being like, so do you have any partners? Are they going to be okay with us doing this? Do they have anything I need to know about? But it's also on you as the person maybe who has the partner or is being asked to do the thing to respect your partner's boundaries. You're going to know them better than anybody. And especially if they're not present during whatever conversation you have regarding consent, you need to be respecting them. That is a consent violation in and of itself. If you've made agreements, if you know of boundaries that you have agreed to respect or to uphold and you violate that, it doesn't matter what the other person did to you, you also violated your partner's consent by not respecting that when you agreed to it. So make sure that you are asking if someone has partners, but also that you're remembering and respecting your partners or any agreements you've had whenever you get involved in anything.
I love that, especially because as long as we're respecting our partners and keeping those lines of communication, we can continue to have amazing experiences and grow. And this last one, it is just as simple as if someone is too drunk, just don't. Please just don't. And for so many reasons, one being legal, but two being we should all be living the golden rule of treat one another as you would want to be treated. And I, for one, would not like to be taken advantage of if I was too drunk. And you would never want to have people speak of you and say that you did something with someone while they were too drunk, and then all of a sudden you become the violator. If there is one thing that I am more excited than playing with someone the first time, it's the ability to play with someone the second time. And I can guarantee you, if you do so while they are too drunk to remember, while they are too drunk to give consent, your ability to play with them again goes down drastically, as well as anyone they talk to. This community is small while large. And if you are the type of person that is okay with taking advantage of people while they're drunk, you are very quickly going to become known for that. And last but not least, the trauma of that is way worse than just passing up the opportunity. When that person does come to, you don't want to be a part of that trauma in a negative way. You want to be there in a positive way. So if you do find someone that is just too drunk, please, especially at an OTB event, find staff, find security, make sure that that person, not only that you are making sure you're not obtaining false consent, but that others can't, and that that person can be brought to a safe place. We all have that responsibility to each other. So if they're too drunk, just don't, and come find one of us, and we promise to help get them to a safe space.
Absolutely. That's something that I really want to stress, because in the lifestyle, a lot of people enjoy drinking. They enjoy even playing drunk with alcohol involved. And I don't think there's anything wrong with play while you are drunk whenever you have negotiated that consent when you were sober. You can always ask people as the party is getting started before everyone's had one too many, hey, if we get into this later, are you going to be okay with it? You can talk to people before the party starts, you get their permission, talk to their partners, things like that. Sometimes we do get drunk and we do have sex with people, but it's one thing to have sex with people who we trust, people that we've already talked to and said, hey, I'm good if you want to do this to me, versus we're waking up next to someone we don't remember even meeting, let alone having a sober consent-filled conversation with. So that was something I definitely wanted to stress. So that was our presentation on consent. Consent matters so much in OTB. It's one of the big reasons why I've been drawn to this group more than other lifestyle groups I've been a part of in the past, is that it's one of the most important things that we talk about. We want everyone to have a good, safe time and to know that they're having a good, safe time, not being taken advantage of when they're drunk or being forced or manipulated or you know, pushed into something that they didn't want to do. So that's why I'm really glad that we could present this. Before we kind of move on, I just wanted to see if there was any questions from anybody or if anyone had anything to add. Feel free to do that right now. Okay. Yeah, that was it. If you are wanting to take advantage of a discount code for any future OTB event, the discount code is sexy consent, all one word and lowercase. So sexy consent. You will be able to use that for any future OTB event for $5 off, because we really do appreciate people who take consent seriously, who wanted to attend this and wanted to, you know, refresh their memory or learn something new, and be a part of that consent conversation. So thank you guys so much. If you have any feedback for us, please feel free to reach out to us, to myself, to Jennifer, or any of the OTB staff, if you want to see things more like this or have anything else to add. So thank you guys so much. And that was it. I hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you all.